In October 2022, the United States government made a phone call that would change the global balance of power. On the other end of that call was Jensen Huang. The message was simple: stop selling your best AI chips to China, immediately, no exceptions. With that one phone call, Jensen Huang lost access to a market worth $15 billion a year, roughly 25% of NVIDIA's total revenue. Thousands of Chinese companies that had been buying NVIDIA's most advanced GPUs were cut off overnight. But this wasn't just about money. This was about the most dangerous technology race in human history. And Jensen Huang, the son of Taiwanese immigrants, was caught right in the middle of it. This is the story of how a chip became a weapon, and how Jensen Huang was forced to choose between his profits and his country. To understand why the China ban hit Jensen so hard, you need to understand just how deeply NVIDIA was embedded in China's technology ecosystem. For over 2 decades, China had been NVIDIA's second-largest market. Chinese tech giants, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, Huawei, were among Jensen's biggest customers. They bought NVIDIA GPUs by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. They built massive AI data centers powered entirely by Jensen's chips. And it wasn't just the big companies. China's AI startup ecosystem, the second largest in the world after the United States, ran almost exclusively on NVIDIA hardware. Universities, research labs, government agencies, they all used CUDA. They all needed Jensen's GPUs. By 2022, China represented approximately $15 billion in annual revenue for NVIDIA, about a quarter of the company's total sales. That's not a side business, that's a pillar. But here's what made the relationship even more complex. Jensen Huang has deep personal ties to the region. He was born in Taiwan, an island that China considers its own territory. He speaks Mandarin fluently. He had personally cultivated relationships with Chinese tech executives for decades. In 2019, Jensen called China one of the most important markets in the world for NVIDIA. For Jensen, China wasn't just a market, it was personal. And then, everything changed. Starting around 2018, the United States government began to realize something alarming. The same AI chips that powered recommendation algorithms and chatbots could also be used for something far more dangerous: military AI. NVIDIA's most powerful GPUs, the A100 and H100, weren't just good at training language models. They were also capable of designing hypersonic missiles, running battlefield simulations, powering autonomous weapons systems, and processing satellite intelligence in real time. The Pentagon concluded that selling these chips to China was equivalent to handing over strategic military technology. Every GPU that went to a Chinese data center could potentially be repurposed for military applications. And once the chip was sold, the US had no way to control how it was used. The national security establishment had made up its mind. NVIDIA's chips were no longer just commercial products, they were weapons of war. This story connects to the incredible rise of Jensen Huang we covered in Part 1 and the Big Tech Rebellion in Part 2. Links to both are in the description. Subscribe to follow this entire series. October 7th, 2022. A date that will be remembered in technology history. The Biden administration announced sweeping export controls on advanced semiconductor technology to China. The rules were unprecedented in their scope. American companies were forbidden from selling AI chips above a certain performance threshold to Chinese entities. They couldn't even help Chinese companies design their own advanced chips. For NVIDIA, the impact was immediate and devastating. The A100, NVIDIA's most popular data center GPU, was banned from sale to China overnight. The H100, the next-generation chip that Jensen had just unveiled, was banned before a single unit could be shipped across the Pacific. Jensen Huang suddenly found himself in an impossible position. A quarter of his revenue had just been declared illegal. But Jensen, being Jensen, didn't just accept the ban and move on. He looked for a loophole, and he found one. Within months, NVIDIA developed a new chip specifically designed for the Chinese market, the A800. It was deliberately slowed down. Its performance was capped just below the threshold set by the export controls. It was technically legal to sell in China. Jensen called it a compliant chip. It was a brilliant move. Chinese companies, desperate for any NVIDIA hardware they could get, bought the A800 in massive quantities. NVIDIA's China revenue stabilized. Wall Street exhaled. But the US government was not amused. October 17, 2023. Almost exactly 1 year later, the Biden administration updated the export controls. The new rules were even stricter. The A800, banned. The H800, another China-specific chip, banned. The performance thresholds were lowered so dramatically that virtually any chip capable of meaningful AI training was now prohibited. The government had essentially told Jensen, "Nice try, but we meant what we said." No advanced AI technology for China, period. This time, there was no loophole, no clever workaround. Jensen Huang had lost China. The financial impact was staggering. Analysts estimated that the updated export controls would cost NVIDIA between $8 billion and $12 billion in annual revenue. NVIDIA's stock dropped 5% in a single day when the new rules were announced. But the real damage wasn't just financial, it was strategic. With NVIDIA chips banned, Chinese companies were now forced to develop their own AI chips. Huawei, already under severe US sanctions, accelerated work on its Ascend 910B processor. Chinese startups like Biren Technology and Moore Threads received billions in government funding to build NVIDIA alternatives. The US chip ban was designed to slow down China's AI development. But it may have inadvertently done something far more dangerous. It lit a fire under China's domestic chip industry, creating future competitors that Jensen would have to face for decades to come. $15 billion lost. The US government rewriting the rules, and China building its own chips to fight back. If you're as fascinated by this tech Cold War as I am, hit that like button. What made Jensen Huang's position uniquely painful was the personal dimension of this conflict. Jensen was born in Taiwan, the island that sits at the very center of the US-China technology Cold War. Taiwan produces over 90% of the world's most advanced chips through TSMC, the company that manufactures NVIDIA's GPUs. If China were to invade Taiwan, a scenario that US military planners consider increasingly plausible, it could shut down NVIDIA's entire supply chain overnight. Jensen was caught between three forces. The US government wanted him to be a weapon against China. China wanted him to keep selling. And Taiwan, his homeland, was the fragile prize that both superpowers were fighting over. In public, Jensen walked an impossibly careful line. When asked about the China ban at a press conference, he said, "We comply fully with all US government regulations, but we also believe that technology should be broadly available. The world benefits when everyone has access to computing." Behind closed doors, Jensen was lobbying furiously. NVIDIA spent over $20 million on lobbying in 2023 alone, more than any other chipmaker. Jensen personally met with Commerce Department officials, arguing that overly strict controls would simply push Chinese companies to build their own chips faster, ultimately making the ban self-defeating. He had a point. By 2024, Huawei's Ascend 910B was being deployed across China. It wasn't as good as NVIDIA's H100, but it was good enough for many AI applications. Chinese companies that had once been loyal NVIDIA customers were now learning to live without Jensen's chips, and once they learned, they might never come back. Jensen publicly warned about this in an interview with the Financial Times. "If China can't buy from us, they'll build their own, and when they do, we won't just lose the Chinese market, we'll have created a new competitor." It was a prophecy that was already coming true. But there was another dimension to Jensen's chess game that almost nobody discussed publicly: the Taiwan question. NVIDIA doesn't manufacture its own chips. Every single NVIDIA GPU is fabricated by TSMC in Taiwan. If China invaded Taiwan or even blockaded it, NVIDIA would lose its entire manufacturing capability. The most valuable technology company on Earth would become a company with brilliant designs and zero ability to produce them. Jensen understood this risk better than anyone. He began quietly diversifying NVIDIA's supply chain, exploring partnerships with Samsung in South Korea and Intel's foundry services in the United States. He supported the US CHIPS Act, which allocated $52 billion to build semiconductor factories on American soil. Jensen was preparing for a world where he might lose access to Taiwan, just as he had already lost access to China. The China chip ban has fundamentally reshaped the global technology landscape, and Jensen Huang is navigating a world that no tech CEO has ever had to face before. The world is splitting into two technology ecosystems. On one side, the United States and its allies, powered by NVIDIA, AMD, and TSMC. On the other, China, building its own AI chip industry from scratch, funded by hundreds of billions in government subsidies. For Jensen, the math is complicated but clear. He lost $15 billion in Chinese revenue, but the rest of the world's appetite for AI chips has grown so explosively that NVIDIA's total revenue has actually increased. In 2024, NVIDIA posted revenue of over $60 billion, more than double the year before. The China loss was painful, but the AI boom in the West more than compensated. Still, Jensen knows this isn't sustainable forever. China represents 1.4 billion people and the world's second-largest economy. A permanent technology embargo means permanently surrendering a massive market to competitors who won't be bound by American rules. Jensen's response has been characteristically strategic. He's doing three things simultaneously. First, he's doubling down on markets where he can still sell freely: Japan, South Korea, India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. Jensen has been personally visiting these countries, building relationships, opening offices. He's replacing China revenue with the rest of Asia. Second, he's working with the US government to shape future export controls, pushing for rules that are strict enough to satisfy national security hawks, but flexible enough to let NVIDIA sell lower-tier chips in China. It's a delicate dance, and Jensen is one of the few CEOs with the political skill to pull it off. Third, and most importantly, he's accelerating innovation. Jensen's logic is simple. If Chinese companies are going to build their own chips, the only defense is to stay so far ahead that their chips are always a generation behind. As long as NVIDIA's technology is the best in the world, customers everywhere, including countries that trade with both the US and China, will choose NVIDIA. It's the same strategy he's used his entire career. When in doubt, move faster. Jensen lost $15 billion and still came out stronger. Subscribe for the next chapter in this incredible story. Jensen Huang has survived every crisis that's been thrown at him. Failed products, near bankruptcy, skeptical investors, a rebellion by his own customers, and now a geopolitical conflict between the world's two superpowers. He was born in Taiwan, raised in America, and built a company that both nations desperately need. He is, in many ways, the human embodiment of the US-China technology relationship, deeply connected to both sides, trusted by neither completely, and too important for either to ignore. The leather jacket CEO isn't just running a chip company anymore. He's navigating the most complex geopolitical landscape in the history of technology. And so far, he's winning. But for how long? Because there's one more threat that Jensen Huang hasn't solved yet, and it might be the most dangerous of all. It's not a competitor, it's not a government, it's the technology itself. In the next video, I'll tell you about the dark side of NVIDIA's success, the environmental cost, the energy crisis, and why some scientists believe AI chips are consuming so much electricity that they could destabilize the entire power grid. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.